Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. We got Joe Rogan and Evan Haffer, and they're talking about people being able to misuse certain systems in order to infiltrate. And what Joe Rogan's talking about is, trans people being able to use women bathrooms. And that's a good thing if you're actually uniquely in that situation where you feel like you're in another body. But he's talking about those people who are trying to game the system. So I'm going to be playing that clip for you, and then I have a crazy story for you about the exact same thing. Listen till the end, and you're going to hear that story. Let's get into this. Don't forget about IamCoachColin.com. We got this. Boom. We got that. Bang. And we got the Great Resist shirt. Discount code is IamCoachColin. All capital letters, all one word. One L in the name, Colin. Let's get to it.
Because they're really easily led.
Easily.
And if you are one of those people, maybe you don't have an 85 IQ, maybe it's 89, maybe it's 90, maybe you're just gullible. You can get sucked into thinking that this is the only way to think. And if you see it magnified in your social media algorithm because of China, because of Russia, and because of these troll farms, which we absolutely know exist, it shifts the narrative. It shifts the way people discuss and think about things. It shifts what's acceptable. When people start going against the grain and they get attacked by all these trolls, it fucking puts the brakes on a lot of discussions.
Well, and that's the only way that we're going to move the ball forward. And I hate using sports analogies, but that's the only way we're going to be able to move things forward is if we can get out of what I would say is the idiot circus participating in these nonsense subjects versus, hey, guys, we have to maintain our sovereignty. We have to maintain what we would call our principles internationally. Why? Why is that important? Why should we be thinking about these things? And I think these are real questions that we can be talking about. Like a good one is, why is our national debt where it is today? Why do we have $33 trillion in debt? What is the debt service going to happen for our country, the individual taxpayers? How does that look like? What does that look like in 10 years from now versus whether or not we're arguing who's male or female or how many pronouns you have? I think we should be talking about those things. Those are really substantive conversations.
Yeah. And then climate change comes up, and that's the next one people start fighting about. It's like you got to keep as many beach balls up in the air at the concert as possible. Just keep bouncing those fuckers around to distract people.
It's a distraction.
It's a giant distraction. Whether you realize it or not, whether you're overconfident in maybe your own ability to navigate waters, and you're like, it's not affecting me. It's affecting culture. And if it's affecting culture, it's going to have an impact on you. It's going to come towards you. You're going to have to push back against something that you wouldn't have to push back against. Some real nonsense shit. And if you go against it, you're a Nazi. Like this whole men using the women's bathroom. Like, listen, I'm not an anti-trans person, but if you don't believe that there are certain male predators that are sex offenders that wouldn't take advantage of the ability to wear a dress and then all of a sudden be able to go into any woman's room they want, well, they definitely do.
Right.
And you don't have a way of discerning who's a legitimate trans person that has gender dysphoria, that really just wants to be accepted as a woman, and who's a sick fuck who just wants to go watch women shit, because those guys are real too. And if you don't agree with that, if you don't say that those people are real, now all of a sudden you've created a whole category of sexual predators that prey on women that have a Willy Wonka golden ticket. Now they can just go into women's spaces. They can go into women's locker rooms. They can go into women's anything. All they have to do is say they identify as a woman. And it's not hard to do.
No.
You don't even have to look like a woman. You just say you identify as a woman. You can put lipstick on if you want. Like, we're so lenient about this shit. And I'm not saying I know a solution, because like, if you ever remember Blair White?
Oh yeah.
She used the women's room.
Mm-hmm.
Why shouldn't she use the women's room? Like, that's a trans woman who's like, that's a trans woman. That's a real, she lives like a woman. She wants to call herself a woman, I'm in. But that's not everyone.
No.
There's one, this one, I think this person lives in, I want to say Canada, but somewhere north. But on their social media, they wrote, some women have penises, and if you don't like it, you could suck my dick. Full beard, wearing a dress, looking like a guy in a dress. And you're like, okay, you might be insane. How about you're insane?
Right.
And how about if everybody just accepts that blanket? Well, now you have, like, you leave this door open for chaos. And if you can't talk about it, because if you talk about it, you're a Nazi, like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? We gave perverts, like, a complete Willy Wonka golden ticket, a hall pass.
Give them a hall pass, and then you can monopolize the conversation in the country around what quite literally small, meaningless things versus saying, these are big strategic threats to our way of life. Like I
Yeah.
think there are people outside of this country every day that are looking to undermine our entire premise of what we've built over the course of the last several hundred years. I mean, I don't even necessarily say that I believe in this and it's not a feeling. It is what it is in the context of spending most of my life overseas and working against these intelligence agencies. You know what they're capable of. And you know what they're doing. They love this. Like they love this chaotic, weird conversation that we're trapped in, arguing about all of these different things, because at that point we're taking our eye off the ball.
Eye off the ball. That's actually a perfect way of saying it. There have been conversations where I'm going to tell you this weird story that exemplifies what Joe's talking about exactly. But there have been people who have said, I think even Jordan Peterson talks about it, but in other countries, when you don't have much, when you're worried about like eating, like how you're going to eat, how you're going to, like a lot of the world lives off like $1 or $2. So it's like, how am I going to get that dollar to buy that food, to feed the family, to go to sleep okay, to wake up tomorrow, fed properly so I can go out and get the $1 or $2 so I can feed the family. And like, that's what they're worried about. And when you're worried about that, you don't have time to worry about who's going in what washroom and who's dressed like what and what someone identifies with. There's a lot of people who come from China even, where they come here and sometimes if they'll bump into people and you'll think that they are not that polite because they don't do the whole, oh, so sorry and everything like that. Oh, excuse me. They don't do all that because they're used to being from a place where there's so many people. Indian people have this too. There's so many people that if you decided to say sorry to every person you bumped into, you'd be standing around all day. You'd be, oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. You don't do all that. So so when they come here, it seems like they're impolite, but they're actually not. They're just like, you just got to keep moving. Like, what are you talking about? I don't have time to apologize to you. Like, you want an apology because someone bumped into you? Like, that's crazy because they come from such a different culture. And a lot of the world, going back to the first thing I said, a lot of the world is so consumed with just living. We have it really, really good here. Really, really good. My friend said to me one time, he's like, do you realize, because I was a little down in the dumps, and he's like, do you realize that we live better than 98.8% of the world? He's like, you know that? And I was like, and I think of that every time. Every time I want to be down on something, I always think of that. But Evan's right. They do love that we're caught up in these weird conversations because they look over. Like, you ever see Matt Walsh, What is a Woman? And he's in Africa and he's asking about the things that we talk about normally. And he's asking like a chief. It's like an African chief. And the guy's just laughing. He's like, this is not a thing here. He's like, I don't know what you're talking. Like he didn't even understand what he was saying to him. And he's asking what a woman is. He's asking all these things. And he's just like, I don't understand the importance of these questions. Like, you've come all the way to Africa and this is what you're asking me. Like, he just didn't understand. It's funny. It's funny to see the way the rest of the world works, which is very commendable to Tucker because Tucker is going around the world because he wants to see how America looks from another lens. It's very interesting. Now, the story that I have, very interesting story. This guy, and I got some other examples too that I'm going to pull up. Got some other examples as well. But my buddy, I met up with him and his wife, and we were talking, and she was talking about how my buddy has a friend who's a sheet metal worker. So sheet metal workers, and this is another example. This is a gentleman who decided to just identify as a woman so he could get put inside a female prison because he assaulted some women. And he knew how he'd be treated by some actual men because he's a coward. And he knew how he'd be treated by actual men. So he decided to start dressing up like this, acting like he was a woman so he could get placed in a female prison. And they are so afraid to question him like the rest of the world. This is UK as well, Scotland. They're so afraid to question him that they just said, okay, put him into a male prison. Now, similar story. This guy's a sheet metal worker, right? And apparently, and I don't understand how this works. I didn't ask about all that, but I was just listening to the story. And apparently, when you go back to school as a sheet metal worker, for some reason, the women were getting paid more than the men for going back to school. Don't know why, but apparently that's what was happening. And this guy that my buddy knew couldn't take that kind of financial hit. So he was like, you know what? I'm not going to take this financial hit. I don't deserve to have to take it. I don't want to take it. So he goes to the administrative people and he says, I see you have me here as a man. I see the pay rate and everything. He goes, I just want to let you guys know, I actually identify as a woman. And again, talking about weeding people out. And not even weeding people out like in a malicious way, just being able to question people. They were so afraid to question him that they just looked at him and they knew in their head, this doesn't look like a woman. I don't think this person's a woman, but they say they are. Done. They started paying him the rate. They put him down as a woman, everything. Now, if this guy wanted to go the extra step, he could have started going into the women's washroom when he was at school. There's a bunch of things that he could have done. And that's just one example of somebody gaming the system. Someone deciding, you know what? I just want to do this. I don't really feel this way. I'm not really one of those people that has this very unique situation in life where I feel like I'm in the wrong body. I'm not one of those people, but I'm going to say I am. It's wild. This guy right here, he's another example. Thankfully, they actually came to their senses, and they actually ended up placing him in a men's prison, and they just isolated him. But he kept up with the same thing. And again, they were so afraid to question it. His ex-wife came forward and said, that's not him. He doesn't feel that way. He's making this up. Friends, family came forward. It was obvious that he was lying. They could not question it. It's very interesting that you can't do that. And it's like, again, I go back to what I said at the beginning. Thank God people are willing to weed through people when it comes to me. I'm black. I got tattoos on my hands and on my arms and on my back. I'm always wearing hoodies. You could look at me from afar and just assume some things about me. But thank God people are willing to listen to me speak, hear my thought process, see the content that I cover, and actually make a decision. They go, you know what? He's actually not like those people. He's a little different, I've gotten the compliment many times from older gentlemen where they go, you're one of the good ones, And I don't take it as an insult. I know what they mean. They've taken enough time to get to know me that they're like, you know what? You're not what I usually see. You're not what I thought. I've had that happen many times. I've had Jewish friends even say to me, I've had Jewish people, ones that I didn't even know that well. And they talk to me for a while and they're like, you know what? You have a Jewish soul. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And they're like, for sure, in another life, you were Jewish and you still have that soul. And I'm like, okay. Thanks. And it's just, just a compliment that they've taken enough time to know me, that they're weeding through. They know what they usually think of people that look like me, and they've gotten to know me, and they're like, there's no way he's like those people. We should be able to do that. I'm giving some positive instances of it, but we should be able to do that with guys like this, with people like Joe Rogan was talking about. You should be able to do that and kind of question and say, hey, I don't know if that's true. Here's another example. In Ontario, Canada, this is a shop teacher. He just decided one day that he was just gonna classify himself as a woman, and then he started coming to school like this, started showing that to a bunch of kids. You know what I mean? And the school board was so afraid to question this, so afraid that they just allowed it. They were just like, okay. And you know why? Because the next institution above that, if it had to go a step further, which means that if that gentleman decided to sue, even the courts would be so afraid that they would just be like, okay, I'm not going to question it. Award this person X amount of millions of dollars because we're not questioning it. We're not doing that. And I just think that we should be, I just wanted to have this conversation because it's definitely not a conversation about all trans people being a certain way. They're not. They're 100% not. There's some people that are in that unique situation, that situation that I could not possibly imagine at all, where they feel like they're in the wrong body. I sound like a white guy, but I don't think of myself like, I should have been born white. I don't think like that. But there's people out there who really feel like they're in the wrong body. And when you just have this blanket way of looking at things and anybody can just jump into those categories, it's just, it becomes a very messed up culture, possibly in certain instances. Like that situation that Joe Rogan put forth, washrooms and everything like that, change rooms, things like that, that could become dangerous, you know? And it's not saying every trans person is dangerous, because if you really feel like you're a trans person, like this person, this is Blair White. Check out Blair White. Blair White is trans. I don't have any worries when Blair White goes into a woman's washroom. Blair White literally felt a certain way and went and acted on it and said, I'm going to change myself. I'm going to put myself in the correct state that I feel I should be in. Done. But not everybody's like that. Not everybody feels that way in reality. We should be able to question things just a little bit, you know? You should be able to question somebody. You know, it's like there's so many young black people and people of color that will see a white man who's over 50 and just assume he's racist. Just assume because of the time he grew up in, he must have some kind of racist tendencies. If you're over 60, oh, that's it. You're a red-blooded racist. That's it. Done. You bleed white. It's ridiculous. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I don't know, man. We should be able we should be able to have conversation, right? Because even when it goes back to the trans thing, imagine you do get to question somebody who is like that. Maybe you've never had an encounter with a trans person, and you do get to question them without being labeled a bigot or a horrible person. And you actually do have a conversation with them, and they actually do break it down for you of how they felt and how they've always felt, and how it's been a pain for them their whole lives. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have this different perspective now. I have this new respect. I didn't realize how deep it ran for these people. And it was all because I questioned one of them. And I learned a bunch of things because of that. We should be able to do that. And I think the fact that they don't allow us to do that is because they want more of a divide. If you could speak to, you know, they talk about, Joe Rogan talked about this, Hitler made sure to close down the cabaret shops in World War II because a lot of the people who were working there, the performers and the comedian types, they were Jewish. And if you were able to laugh with someone that was Jewish, you were able to connect with them, you were able to have sympathy and empathy for them, and you could have friendship with them. So he made sure to close that down so people couldn't do that with Jewish people. Not that that's like where all of them worked, but he knew that a lot of them worked in those places. So he shut down all of them. So you couldn't connect. And also so you couldn't connect with your fellow German man over over some drinks and everything. Man, it's just to cause a larger divide. That's what I really think. I think anything that comes like Evan talked about freedom, instead of focusing on gender and all these weird conversations, talking about freedom and sovereignty, that's huge. And the quicker that you get an understanding from those type of people, from your neighbor next door, that comes from a culture you've never seen before, the quicker you can weed people out and understand where people stand, the quicker you can get back to focusing on freedom and sovereignty. And I think that's the thing that they actually don't want. Like he brought up the national debt. How many times a day do you think most people, especially young people, think about the national debt? They really think about it, how it can be solved, and how the government's maybe impacting it negatively. Probably not often. Why? Because he brought it up in the same sentence. Instead, they focus on climate. And if you're somebody who's like, I don't want to focus on climate, I want to focus on the national debt, they're going to look at you like you're some kind of bigot. You're a bigot. What's the matter with you? You don't want to talk about something that's going to destroy the whole world. They make the things that they want to focus on monumental, and the things that should be focused on, it's like, push that aside. Come on. What are you, one of those guys? What are you, a Trump supporter? National debt you want to focus on? It's interesting. I don't think, the last thing is, Joe Rogan said, we've gotten so lenient, and I don't think it's leniency at all. I think it's fear. People are afraid to question how somebody actually feels. They're afraid to question it. I'll go back to the actual, the example of, a young person of color talking to somebody who's over 60, who's white, and finding out, are they actually racist? Do they actually have any kind of prejudice at all? Like, they're afraid to have that conversation. When it comes to somebody who's trans and what washroom they want to use, a lot of people are afraid to have that conversation, because just to have the conversation right away makes you some kind of bigot. Like, why are you questioning this trans person? You know, maybe if you're the white person who's over 60 and you want to talk to a young person of color and you want to understand where they stand, the second you question them, all of a sudden it's like, oh, your racism's showing, your white privilege is showing, all these things. It's all to just keep a divide going. That's what I think. That's me. Anyways, guys, like the video, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments section about this whole thing. Do you think that these conversations are popping up or as more of a distraction? You know, albeit, you know, at times, because we brought up certain situations, could be a serious conversation to be had, but it seems like it's more of a distraction. I really do think the more you get engulfed in conversations like this, and you keep that divide, you don't actually even have the conversation, you know? You're just kind of butting heads with people who feel opposite. The more you're not focused on freedom, the more you're not focused on national debt, the more you're not focused on sovereignty, the more you're not focused on self-sufficiency. I really do think that's it. But you let me know what you think in the comment section. And other than that, I'm out.